Well, welcome back to part 3 of the SolarEdge Energy Bank Review. Now in this video I want to describe all of the performances and functions that we have out of this Energy Bank battery. So to begin with, we want to look at the My SolarEdge app and how the battery looks on that app and how it interacts with the sunshine and other loads in your house. As we can see, we've got real-time loads. We've got 860 watts of solar power right now, and there's about 130 watts of load at the moment with lights and so on. And the remainder is going into my battery. It's 95% charged and it's charging up at the rate of 760 watts. So if we go further down, you can see we've also got a hot water controller. Once the battery is fully charged, any surplus will go into the hot water controller so long as that surplus is less than 1.5 kilowatts. Anything above 1.5 kilowatts will go into my car charger. However, this does not know about the car charger, but the car charger does know about the hot water controller. Now, if we have a look at consumption and production, now, I've been doing some testing previously. It used to be the case that it would show consumption into imports as well as battery consumption. We've also got a state of charge here. If we have a look here, you can see that overnight we dropped down to about 70% charge by the time our morning routine was finished, and then it rapidly recharged in the morning. And then I did some further tests in the afternoon to see the performance of the battery. Now you can ask the question, can you control this battery? Can you charge it up at a cheap rate overnight? And can you discharge the battery in the early evening? And the answer is yes, you can, but there's some more info about that. So in order to gain storage profiles, you need your installer to give you installation and administrative rights. Now I got this sorted out by SolarEdge, but your installer should be able to sort you out. That said, there were a lot of emails to and from to try and get various technical issues sorted out in order to get access. But what you have here is a monitoring platform which you can access on a desktop or web browser. So if we go to my account, you can go to storage profiles. You create a new storage profile using the add storage profile button. And here we've already got a storage profile set up. Now within here, we've got daily profile types. What we're going to do is use a charging mode. And we've got different modes of operation. We can have solar power only. That will basically disconnect your battery from the inverter, and your inverter will only respond to any solar power. We can also charge from the solar power and the grid. So for example, cheap overnight electricity tariffs in the winter time, you will want to charge up your battery using this mode. We can discharge to maximize export. This is a mode that you might want to use in the summertime, in the early evening, to get the best export prices if you have Octopus Agile outgoing tariff. And finally, we've also got maximize self-consumption. Now, there are other modes which are very interesting here. We've got charge from clipped solar power. This will maximize production if your inverter is export limited. So for example, with this site, we're limited to 5 kilowatts of export. So if there's available production above 5 kilowatts, so for example, 6 kilowatts of production, then 1 kilowatt of that will go into the battery. This is a very useful mode to have anytime from mid-spring to early autumn. So now we're just going to leave it on charge from solar power and grid. And then once that daily profile is set up, we can then apply it to whichever days of the year that we want that profile to apply. So in this instance, we've got a special test day set up. And if we go to that test day, we can choose which profile we want to have. So in this instance, we want to have the charge mode, and we want to update it. And then we can click on update. So once your storage profile is set up, you need to go back to your site. Within Admin, you need to scroll to the right till you see Energy Manager. We can then select My Account Profile. And since the test profile is active on the Anthony Dyer storage profile, we can now hit Save. It takes some time for that storage profile to become active, but once it does, you'll see that there is 5 kilowatts being charged into the battery. What we're now going to do is we're going to go outside and add the charge of the car charger on top of the battery charger, and we're going to look at maximum demand. Now, one misunderstanding is very common. This number here, 100 amps, cannot be trusted. This is the maximum rating of the fuse which can go into the D&O fuse cutout. The actual rating of the fuse in here could be quite different. It could be as low as 60 amps. Now, when you consider on the Octopus Go tariff, you're charging up a car at 32 amps. You're charging up your SolarEdge home battery at 21 amps. You're charging up potentially the hot water cylinder at 13 amps. And then you've got 1 amp of base load. You're about 67 amps. And if this fuse in here is only rated at 60 amps, then after a period of time, the fuse is going to blow. Now, I can't pull this open and have a look at the rating of the fuse. It's not my property. There is a seal here. If you break the seal, you're committing criminal damage. That will certainly be the attitude of the D&O. But there are other clues in here that we can use to determine what the rating of this fuse could and likely is. So the cable going from the fuse cutout to the meter is 25 square millimeters. That is more than adequate for 100 amp current carrying capacity. But these cables here are only 16 square millimeters. There's no slack in here, but there's quite a bit of air in there. And my electrician tells me that 16 square millimeters is indeed the case. Now, according to wiring regulations, the rating of this cable when it's clipped to a wall, which is known as clipped direct in wiring regulation terms, that's only 87 amps. So I don't think there's a 100 amp fuse in here. 80 amps is certainly feasible, but judging from electricians' forums, 60 amps is also quite common for 16 square millimeter cable. So obviously the adequacy of the power supply coming into the property is a concern. Do you want to have to spend thousands of pounds digging up your driveway to get a new cable laid in just to make your supply adequate? I don't think you do. So the question is, how can this be compatible with the SolarEdge Energy Bank? Can we adjust some settings somehow? So if we go into menu and we go to other settings, we go to advanced, we go to supply grid, we go to network, you can see there's a grid limit, 50 amps. So this will limit the current coming into the house when you've got other loads in that house, and it will limit the current going to the charger. We don't want to upgrade the supply cable, that's far too expensive, and we don't want to do without this rather handy charger either. So what you can see is that we're charging the vehicle at 5 kilowatts and we are importing about 4.5 kilowatts. What we're now going to do is add the car charging onto the load, and we're going to see whether 50 amps, which is about 12 kilowatts, whether it becomes limited to that. So now it's charging up. Okay, so now the import is ramping up. One of the things you can see is that the readings on the charger are updating much more frequently than the readings on the actual My Energy app. So we're getting close to about 11.5 kilowatts. That's very good. Let's just have a look at some other readings. So the voltage is 228 volts. We expect that. It's 11.5 kilowatts. So now what I want to do is add another dynamic load, which is going to be the kettle, and we're going to switch that on and see what happens there. So the kettle is now on. So you can see that the import is being limited, which is just what we want to see. So now we're going to turn the car charger off. That's just what we want to see. So that was all good fun stuff. So now what we want to do is update the profile. So we go to my account, and now we want the test day to look at the discharge mode. So we'll update that, and then we'll click on update. And so it takes a while for new profiles to be loaded. So it'll take some time for the charge mode to be turned into a discharge mode. So the charging mode is now off, and it should be updating to a discharge mode very soon. So there we go. It's now discharging the battery at 5 kilowatts. That's just what we want. What we want to now do is go back onto the profiles. And what we want to do now is we want to test the off mode. So the off mode is solar power only. And this is a daily profile which applies all day long. We'll talk about that more in a bit more detail later on. So now we want to go onto the test day. We'll change the off mode to here. We'll click on update, and then we'll update at the bottom. So again, the off mode will take some time to come into effect, so we just have to wait. So what happens is that the inverter, when it changes modes, it will switch off the inverter for a brief period of time, and then it will re-engage into a different mode. Okay, so it took about 3 minutes for the solar panels to just kick back in there. So this is a mode which just changes the mode of the inverter. It's nothing to be alarmed about. If it does take a little bit of time, just be patient. So here we've got a situation where we're going to charge up the car without draining the battery. This is typical of the situation that you have overnight when you are using the cheap overnight tariff. You don't want to be draining the battery normally. So here we have got the situation where this car is now charging. So if I go to my energy, we've got it on fast charge. So this is ramping up now. So it's 7 kilowatts, and it's going to be pulling that in from the grid. If we just have a look, yes, it is. There you go. My Energy app just seems to take a long time to update. If we go onto SolarEdge, you can see that we're now pulling 7 kilowatts, 6.7 kilowatts in from the grid, and the battery is not being charged. So this is ideal for an overnight charging situation. So one major concern that you have with a home battery is charging up the car battery whilst draining the home battery at the same time. Now, as we've got the home battery coupled up to the solar power inverter, that car charger there cannot tell the difference between power supplied by the sunshine and power supplied by a battery. So what options do we have in this situation? So again, we can go into this menu, and we go all the way back to the menus that we had for the grid limitation. So if we go to supply grid, go to network, we've got what's known as an export margin. So what that does is that when you charge up the car on Eco Plus mode, it will charge it up in such a way that 100 watts of solar power will be exported to the grid. The thinking goes that the battery will not be supplying electricity for export. Now, most of the time, that is absolutely going to be the case. Now, you can adjust this number up or down. I tried it with 50 watts. It wasn't so good, but I'm finding 100 watts, the charger is very capable of switching off when the surplus solar disappears. So what we want to do is build up a proper storage profile for this battery, which covers the whole year. So at the moment, by default, we've got maximum self-consumption. What that means is that when there's more sunshine than load, it will charge up the battery. And when there's more load than sunshine, then it will discharge the battery. It's a very straightforward mode. And when you get your battery commissioned, this is the mode that everybody has. It's perfectly adequate for most people who choose to have a battery, but in my analysis, it's inadequate for making a full economic case of the battery. There's about double the economic value to be had when you use time of day charging at nighttime on the Octopus Go tariff in the winter, and also maximum export in the summertime in the early evening. So what we're going to do is explore the options in here. So we've got maximum self-consumption, and what we're going to do is explore this. So we've got in here a mode that can be selected for each period of the day. We're going to leave this on at for 24 hours, and we're going to create a brand new profile. So we'll call this mid-autumn, and what we will have is a default mode which is maximum self-consumption. But in addition to that, we are going to have 12:30 till 4:30, and we're going to have solar power only. Very good. And the remaining period of time, we've got maximum self-consumption, and this is where we will use the battery as required. And then we'll create some more profiles. So here's the early winter profile, and this is what I'm going to be intending to have from mid-November all the way through until the end of January. So we've got an opportunity to charge the car for 3 hours, for 4 hours, the whole 4 hours, and then the last hour of the evening time, we can charge the battery as well. That will be 5 kilowatts for 1 hour, so that will charge the battery up to 50% if it's at 0. Okay, so this is my profile for mid-spring to late summer when we've got lots of sunshine. So at night time, we want to discharge the battery to minimize import. We're not going to be charging the battery up, and we're going to have that regime all the way until 10 o'clock in the morning. Now, from 10 o'clock onwards, what we want to do is then charge from clipped solar power. What that will enable us to do is charge the battery with any surplus above 5 kilowatts of solar. What we then want to do from 2 o'clock onwards is maximize self-consumption, and we want to do that all the way through until 7 o'clock, and this is where you get your highest prices for export. Typically from 7 o'clock to 8:30. Sometimes it can happen a bit earlier at 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon. And then from 9 o'clock, 8:30 onwards, we want to discharge to minimize import. So what I've also got here as well is another profile for days when you're charging the car and cloudy days. Very straightforward. We just want to maximize straight self-consumption all the way through. So these are the daily profile types. So we've now set all of those up. Now what we want to do is assign seasons to each of these daily profiles. So we're going to delete this default season, and we're going to add seasonal profiles. So here we've got one example of a season. It goes from October the 10th until November the 5th. The days are failing, so I've applied mid-autumn, late winter profile here. Okay, so now we've applied daily profile types, which define the profile for each particular day, and then we've assigned those daily profiles to each of the seasons. So the seasons define the periods of time during the whole year. We've got a backup reserve here, and we have got no limit on the AC charge profile. So we'll just hit update, and that is it. So we are on storage profile here, so there's nothing to do here. So what we'll do is go back to the dashboard. So now my profiles are active. So do I think the functionality can be improved? I do. For one thing, when it comes to maximum charging and maximum discharging, I want to charge up to a certain state of charge, And once you've reached that state of charge, I want the mode to then change to maximum self-consumption. Likewise with discharging, I want to discharge down to a level of about 20 to 30% and then revert to maximum self-consumption. That means I don't have to, that means the guessing game of how long you have to discharge can be taken out of the equation. Now, in terms of car charging, this inverter does not know anything about the car charger whatsoever. It's completely invisible. It's just another household load. And likewise, the car charger doesn't know anything about the battery. And I just think to myself, when the way I'm doing things, setting up storage profiles, setting up export margins, it's a bit of a faffy way of trying to control the car and battery relationship. In here, we've got the import-export meter. There are 3 channels for 3-phase current transformer measurements. Only one of those channels is used for the single-phase incomer for measuring the grid. The other 2 channels are spare. So my thought is that you could use one of those other 2 channels and put a current transformer around the supply going to the electric car charger. You could then have a situation where you could configure the battery not to discharge if the car is charging. I think that would be something which SolarEdge could do. It doesn't cost anything in terms of hardware modifications. Personally, I don't think they'll ever do it because they're trying to sell their own car charger. I don't think interfacing with other car chargers is something they would be interested in, but I'd love to be proven wrong on that matter. But we need to talk about the big elephant in the room. Why is it that installers have got access to storage profiles, but the homeowners don't? Now, inverters are fairly passive devices from an operations point of view. From a data acquisition point of view, that's something else. But for operations, there's very little for a homeowner to do. And in the 22 months that I've owned this inverter, I've not had to do anything except for occasional fault finding with communications to the hot water controller. Batteries are another thing. They are a dynamic entity. They are things which can be controlled to your advantage. And to have an installer standing in between you and the battery that you own, I think is the wrong doctrine to apply. Now, I've managed to work around that with some negotiations with SolarEdge support, and what I've demonstrated to you is absolutely fantastic. Now, the thing about the whole battery market as a whole is that it's very immature at this stage. The economic case for batteries, for me, didn't exist 18 months ago when I got this inverter commissioned. It does exist now. So what's going to happen, according to SolarEdge, is that from November onwards, you will have battery storage profiles available to homeowners within your My SolarEdge app and the monitoring platform. The comments which I can apply now are likely to be historical in a very short space of time. So what I want to do now is look at battery performance. So we're going to go back into the kitchen, we're going to look at varying loads, we're going to look at noise, and then we're going to look at some data analysis. So I decided to actually do this test in here. It's much more appropriate for a good reason. What we're going to do is measure a change in the load. The app tends to be a bit laggy in my experience. So in addition to that, what we're going to do is measure the current directly. This is a DC clamp meter. And what we'll do is just zero it and then put it around here. And what we're going to do is use my favorite load bank and just switch it on. 3, 2, 1, apply. Pretty quick, couple of seconds. The app still hasn't updated yet. So what that actually tells you is that the app can be quite slow to respond to a real-time change in state. I'm very impressed with that. Some people have got other batteries and they complain about the load taking 15 seconds to respond to a change in the load. So the question is, how well does this battery actually perform in real life? Well, if we have a look at yesterday's performance, we can see that 4.5 kilowatt hours of electricity actually came from my batteries. And that's pretty impressive. We still imported electricity at various stages, and we're going to be looking into the reasons why that import actually happened. So let's go on to one of my favorite features of the SolarEdge monitoring platform, and that's the analysis. So what we have here is AC power on the import meter, as well as AC power on the inverter, and also discharge power from the battery. What I want to look at in particular is the period overnight on the 27th of September. So what you can see at various stages is that there was absolutely no import. But we also get these peaks here. Those correspond to times when the fridge freezer kicked in. And here you can see there's about 26 watts of power coming in. There's about 80 watts of power coming from the inverter. And the interesting thing is that there's 20 watts differential between the battery and the inverter. Now, if we have a look in the early evening, where we've got a higher load of 278 watts, you can see again 20 to 21 watts worth of difference between the battery and the inverter. And that, I think, is the overall overhead that the battery and inverter electronics is consuming. But again, what you can see here is that there is absolutely no import at times. And other times you can see that there is a little bit more import here. And they tend to correspond with changes in load. But overnight, these are quite interesting, the imports. I think what's going on, it's perfectly happy dealing with resistive loads, but fridge freezers, their compressors are inductive. So you're going to get a phase angle between your voltage and your current. So maybe that can be addressed in a future upgrade. So one other thing worth showing you is the charging up period on the 27th. So as you can see, it was charging up from just under 40%, and we get to 100% state of charge. But what have we got here? It's still charging up, and it gets down to 99% charge here. It's discharging a bit, but then it gets back up to 99%, and it's still charging. And yeah, there's a certain period of time where we reach 100% power and we're still charging. And I was a bit concerned this might be a battery which is getting overcharged. But my best guess is that this is a calibration issue. As you can see here, once we start discharging, we are still at 100% for a little while, but then it starts coming down again. So how noisy is this thing? Let's just try one thing. So I'm going to charge my car up for a brief period of time. We're going to see how much is drawn from here. So this is pulling 5 kilowatts. It's completely silent. The only thing I can hear is my fridge freezer. This here is the battery I had purchased in February. There is a fan which goes off in here, but this is fully charged. So the power brick here is the thing which makes the noise. So now that it's installed, I think this battery is fantastic. I've very much enjoyed reviewing the performance of this battery over the last couple of days. The tests I did this evening were very enlightening, very reassuring, and the support I've had from SolarEdge has also been fantastic. Some things took quite a bit of effort to get cleared up, but to be quite frank, in this day and age with a shortage of spare parts, you're not going to get much better elsewhere. So the question is, what do I think of the warranty here? It's a 10-year unlimited cycle warranty. That sounds fantastic, but when you dive into the details, it tells you that the warranty is conditional on this being used for standard solar use. Now, all the functions I demonstrated in this video are indeed standard use, but there is the extra word of solar use in that warranty condition. So it raises the question, is it solar use if you charge this up at night time on a cheap overnight tariff? In my opinion, no, it's not. And if they deleted that word from the warranty, I'd have a lot more confidence in it. So the question is, would I buy this battery all over again? I think right now we've got a real problem with shortage of batteries. There are other batteries you can get in the world, such as Give Energy, Pylon Tech, that they still have a shortage of parts, but the lead times for those are measured in 1 or 2 months. The other issue to discuss is the cost. Now, this battery cost about £6,800, including VAT. Once you added this on, it was about £7,200 all told. That was the quote that I had at the end of January. Now you're paying at least an extra £1,000. I think you're paying £8,000. And all the while, you've got other brands such as Give Energy, which can sell you I think it's an 8 kilowatt hour battery, including the inverter as a kit, all for less than £4,000. So you weigh up the two options together. Now, Give Energy is an AC coupled battery, so you're going to need DNO approval, but it does have backup power capabilities. This battery here does not have backup capabilities built into it. You need to get an additional device called a backup interface or backup gateway, and it's not compatible in any case with the inverter that I've got. HD wave inverters are not compatible with the backup interfaces. The only ones which are compatible are 3-phase home wave inverters, which you can get for the European market, or the single-phase energy hub, which you can get for the North American market. There's nothing in terms of single-phase European inverters which is compatible with the backup interface. I think that's going to be the conclusion in terms of my 3-part battery review. I'm not planning to do a part 4 to this, but what I will say is that if you are considering a battery but you don't really want to wait all that long, I would definitely recommend the Bluetti EB240. This is a 2.4 kilowatt hour battery. At the moment, I've seen this on, there's a flash sale on, which I've seen in my Facebook feed. It's about £1,100, reduced from £1,400 when I bought this. So definitely well worth considering. Nowhere near as efficient, the inverter on this, but it has its place. And if the lights do go out this winter time, this thing's available for me. So I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I'll talk to you again very soon.